The Ledger of Lies. Thea Donovan stirred her tea absent-mindedly, watching the swirl of cream dissolve into a soft spiral. The antique teacup felt delicate between her fingers, a stark contrast to the weight of the secret she carried. Outside her penthouse window, the New York skyline glittered under dusk's final light, but her focus wasn't on the view. It was on the man she'd chosen to love. Michael Reynolds. Handsome, charismatic, driven. He had the kind of confidence that walked into a room before he did, the kind that made professors offer extra hours and patients remember his name. When they met 3 years ago at a coffee shop near Columbia's medical school, he'd been the charming student who couldn't afford a latte. She'd been the woman who bought it for him, and everyone after that. But he didn't know who she really was. To him, Thea was a nurse's aide from Queens, sometimes a barista on weekends, always juggling odd jobs to support him. He never knew her last name was Donovan, the same as Donovan and King, one of the most powerful real estate empires on the East Coast. That the studio apartment she rented was owned by one of her family's shell companies. Or that the tip money she gave him was funneled quietly from a trust. She had her reasons. Love, at first. Then suspicion. Then fear. Love made her hide her wealth. She wanted to be loved as Thea, not as a Donovan. But fear kept her from telling the truth, fear that Michael loved what she provided, not who she was. Lately, that fear had started to feel more like certainty. He'd stopped saying thank you. He started calculating his time like a stockbroker, always assessing who added value, who didn't. He once mocked a classmate for staying with a broke girl. It chilled her. A joke, maybe. But then again, maybe not. Tonight, he was working late at the hospital. Again. She'd offered to cook. He declined with a distracted "I'll grab something with the guys." The same guys whose girlfriends he called deadweight just last week. Thea took a breath and set down her cup. She walked into her private study, the one Michael believed was a library she worked at on weekends. She sat at her mahogany desk. The champagne sparkled. The chandeliers shimmered. The room echoed with the clinking of glasses and polite laughter, but all Thea could hear was her heartbeat, thundering louder than the jazz quartet tucked in the corner. She stood near the edge of the banquet hall, a vision in a simple navy dress, modest, elegant, chosen to blend in. Michael hated attention, or so he said. He'd insisted on no designer labels, no drama. Be you, he told her. Just be cool. The irony stung now more than ever. Tonight was supposed to be his night. Graduation from Columbia Medical. The culmination of years of sacrifice, hers mostly. She had been the silent investor in his dream. Rent, food, study retreats, and that one harrowing moment when his tuition payment was suddenly processed at the last minute. He never asked where the money came from. He just said, "You're the best, babe," and kissed her forehead like she was a lucky coin. Now, in this glittering room, surrounded by classmates, professors, and donors, Thea stood at the edge of his life, unacknowledged. She watched him glide through the crowd, the center of every orbit, laughing with women in cocktail dresses, clapping other men on the back like a politician in the making. Her eyes traced the moment he approached Dr. Howarth, the hospital director she'd secretly arranged for him to meet. Michael's smile was brilliant. She waited for him to look for her. Just a glance. A nod. Something. But when he finally called her name, it was like a spotlight, only it burned, not shone. "And there's my loyal girlfriend," he announced loudly, one hand dramatically sweeping toward her. "She kept me alive on ramen and charity. Always knew how to stretch a dollar, even if she doesn't have one." Laughter. Confused at first. Then polite. Then pitying. Thea felt her blood drain from her face. People turned toward her, some surprised, others amused, a few sympathetic. "You know how it is. Michael added with a smirk. Some guys marry doctors. I guess I'll just keep my nurse barista hybrid around for old time's sake. The crowd laughed harder. He raised his glass. To sacrifice. Thea didn't move. Couldn't. The walls pressed in, the room distorted. Her mind blurred, then sharpened with chilling clarity. In that moment, the mask slipped. Not hers. His. This wasn't love. It wasn't even decency. Michael had never cared about her beyond what she could provide: humility, cover, convenience. She'd been a placeholder. A stepping stone. A script he no longer needed now that the curtains had risen on his new life. He turned away from her without a second glance, basking in applause. But he didn't see her eyes, not the storm rising behind them. She picked up a flute of champagne from a passing tray. Not to drink. To mark the moment. The moment Thea Donovan, heir to the Donovan empire, stopped loving Michael Reynolds and started planning his downfall. Thea sat alone in her apartment, silent, surgical, and still. The city lights shimmered like a mirage through her windows, but inside, there was only shadow. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard as she opened the folder her assistant had sent. Reynolds_background. Confidential. At first, there was nothing unusual. A few financial documents. Copies of public profiles. Nothing illegal. Nothing damning. But then, something caught her eye. Michael_Reynolds_personal_journaled, PDF. It opened into scanned pages of handwriting, familiar, clean, slightly slanted. Michael's journal. Her stomach twisted. March 12th. Met Tessa. Nurse practitioner. Single mom. Stable income. Low expectations. Possibly useful for short-term support. April 4th. Thea is nearing financial fatigue. May need to end soon. Can't afford to carry emotional deadweight when better options exist. Thea blinked. Then she scrolled. Each entry was a transaction, not a thought, not a feeling. Cassidy, ended. $3,100 total value. Emotional cost, low. Transition smooth. Rachel, terminated prematurely. Too clingy. Overinvested. Not financially efficient. And then, the file attached at the bottom. Targets_spreadsheet. XLSX. Thea opened it. Rows of names. Women. Ages. Occupations. Notes on income brackets. Time spent. Estimated contributions. Next to each name was a status. Initiated. Emotional hook secured. Financial usefulness peaked. Near end. Transitioning. Next to hers, Thea D. Peak contribution hit. End phase imminent. Proceed post-graduation. She read it twice. Then 3 more times. It wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. She had been mapped, calculated, budgeted, replaced. Beside her laptop, something caught her eye, a leather journal she had never noticed before in Michael's things. Curious and hollow, she opened it. Inside, the original copies. His handwriting. His thoughts. All the women. All the numbers. She found diagrams connecting names to Venmo handles. Transactions under aliases. Color-coded notes linking emotional vulnerability with dollar amounts. Every page was a psychological autopsy of a woman he'd once claimed to love. Thea didn't cry. Not anymore. Instead, she opened a new spreadsheet. And she titled it, Accountability. One column, every woman Michael had targeted. Second column, what he took. Third column, what he deserves. Because this time, she wasn't just going to survive. She was going to burn him from the inside out, quietly, methodically, beautifully. And when she was done, Michael Reynolds would never see another woman as an asset again. It began with a message, then another, then a call. Thea crafted every word with surgical precision, truthful, anonymous, and impossible to ignore. No threats. No accusations. Just a gentle invitation to speak, and a screenshot that made it impossible not to. You don't know me, but I believe we've both been part of something we didn't sign up for. If you're ready to talk, I'm listening. She expected one reply, maybe two. By nightfall, she had 12. And by the end of the week, she had 23. 23 women. Different ages. Different backgrounds. One pattern. They had all met Michael Reynolds. And each of them had a version of the same story, charming beginnings, emotional vulnerability, financial partnership, followed by a slow withdrawal the moment they were no longer useful. A marketing executive from Boston. A nurse in Miami. A widow with a teenage son in Seattle. Each believed they'd been alone. Until now. Thea created a secure digital space, private, encrypted, disguised as a women's wellness forum. She named it Silent Sisterhood. Inside it, voices bloomed. Stories flowed like underground rivers finally meeting the sea. One by one, women posted screenshots, voice messages, transaction records, photos, bits of Michael's web that, alone, looked harmless. But together? It was a pattern, a pathology, a system of emotional fraud. One woman shared a photo of a gift she gave him, a vintage watch she'd inherited from her father. Michael told her he'd accidentally lost it. Thea found it in his drawer last year. Another woman mentioned how Michael advised her to invest in crypto using her student loan refund. He never repaid her. And then came the breakthrough. A woman named Lena uploaded her own file, a mirror of the spreadsheet Thea had found. Only this one was older. Michael had used the same system before. He hadn't changed. He had refined. Thea's hands trembled, but not with fear. With fury. With purpose. She wasn't just exposing a man. She was documenting a predator. Each woman agreed to remain anonymous. But all agreed it was time to act. They didn't want revenge. Not all of them. But they wanted truth. They wanted Michael stopped. Thea promised them he would be. But not with noise. With silence. With precision. With justice. The game Michael had started was over. Now she was writing the rules. The grand ballroom was alive with chatter and light, the air thick with celebration. Guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos mingled beneath towering crystal chandeliers. The scent of fresh flowers mingled with the crisp notes of expensive perfume. Michael Reynolds basked in the glow. Tonight was his night, the moment he'd been working toward for years. The culmination of sweat, sleepless nights, and unbeknownst to many, silent financial support. Yet, something was missing. Thea Donovan stood at the back of the room, watching. Calm, collected, invisible. Her revenge was not loud. It was cold, surgical, and crafted over months. First, the invitations. Michael's name was on every guest list, except for hers. No Thea Donovan. No nurse's aide from Queens. Nothing. He searched the room, eyes darting past laughter, past speeches, until he finally saw her standing alone. Michael's smile faltered. For a split second, something raw cracked through his practiced facade. Then, with all the confidence of a man used to control, he raised his glass in a toast, one calculated to include everyone but her. To the future, he said, voice rich and smooth. To hard work. To the sacrifices that make success possible. No one noticed when Thea slipped out quietly, but she left behind a storm. The whispers started almost immediately. Who was that woman he refused to acknowledge? Why had she paid for the party, anonymously, through a shell company tied to the Donovan Foundation, yet been excluded? Thea didn't need to speak. Her actions spoke volumes. She had already leaked discreet reports of Michael's past manipulations to professional medical forums, forums that matter deeply in the tight-knit world of medical residencies. His reputation, carefully built, began to crack. Doctors and professors shared hushed warnings. Questions surfaced about his character. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Thea's family quietly used their connections to apply pressure in the real estate world, a subtle but firm message delivered to Michael's mother, a prominent real estate agent. No career was untouchable. No secret safe. As Michael smiled for the cameras, oblivious, Thea's plan unfolded like clockwork. She had taken the high ground. Not with noise or public spectacle, but with power silent, devastating power. And when the final reckoning came, Michael Reynolds would find his crown had turned to ashes. The walls Michael had built began to crumble, quietly at first, then with relentless force. It started with a terse email from the residency program director. After reviewing concerns raised regarding your conduct and professionalism, we are placing you on probation pending further investigation. Michael stared at the screen in disbelief. His carefully cultivated image, the man everyone saw as confident and capable, was under siege. Whispers followed him down hospital corridors, eyes averted, cold greetings, invitations rescinded. Thea watched from a distance, her expression unreadable, her plan unfolding perfectly. But she didn't stop there. The real blow came when his mother's real estate agency lost a major client. A client who suddenly reconsidered their relationship due to concerns about the family's integrity. A well-timed call from one of Thea's father's associates sealed the deal. Michael's mother was devastated, but it was clear the message was meant for him. No one was untouchable, not even the proud Reynolds family. Michael's personal life unraveled alongside his professional one. Women he had once manipulated began stepping forward anonymously, corroborating the evidence Thea had gathered. The media picked up on subtle leaks, and soon his name was associated with scandal in quiet circles of power. Alone in his apartment, Michael flipped through the leather journal Thea had found. Each name a wound, each entry a scar. The spreadsheet, the secret accounts, the lies, they were all laid bare. His world was burning down, piece by piece. Meanwhile, Thea's world was rising. She took a prestigious position in her family's healthcare foundation, heading ethical oversight for medical residencies. Her voice, once silent, now held power. She was no longer just the daughter of a wealthy developer. She was a force. A woman who had reclaimed her truth, not with tears or confrontation, but with cold, calculated justice. And as Michael faded into obscurity, Thea thrived, empowered by the very truth he had tried to bury. Spring arrived quietly, washing the city in soft pastels and fresh hope. Thea stood by the window of her new office at the Donovan Healthcare Foundation, looking out over the skyline she had always known, but now saw with new eyes. Gone was the weight of betrayal, replaced by a clarity she never expected to find in pain. Her days were filled with purpose, leading initiatives to ensure ethical standards in medical training, mentoring young women in healthcare careers, and fostering environments where integrity was the foundation, not an afterthought. She had learned that power wasn't just wealth or influence. It was truth, resilience, and the courage to stand firm when the world tried to break you. News of Michael Reynolds faded like a distant echo. The man who had once used her, who had plotted relationships like transactions on a spreadsheet, was now a cautionary tale whispered in residency halls. But Thea didn't look back. Instead, she opened a new chapter, not just for herself, but for every woman who had been silenced or exploited. Her silent sisterhood had grown into a network of advocates and allies, united not by anger, but by strength. And sometimes, late at night, when the city lights flickered like distant stars, Thea allowed herself a small, knowing smile. She had lost much, but she had gained herself. And that was a victory no one could ever take away. Years later, Thea Donovan walked through a bustling hospital lobby, her presence calm, confident, and respected. She was no longer just the heiress to a real estate empire. She was a leader in healthcare ethics, a voice for the vulnerable, and a symbol of quiet strength. Her journey had been forged in fire, betrayal, heartbreak, and the cold calculus of revenge. But those scars were no longer wounds. They were badges of survival and wisdom. From the shadows of manipulation, Thea had emerged not broken, but whole. Michael Reynolds had vanished into obscurity, his ambitions undone by the very woman he had underestimated. And Thea? She had rewritten her story, one not defined by wealth or titles, but by integrity, justice, and the courage to reclaim her life on her own terms. As she glanced at her phone, a new message appeared, a request to speak at a conference about ethics in medicine and the power of community. She smiled. The future was hers to shape. And this time, she would do it on her own terms. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe for more short stories.